So today's guest is John Beath from JBE LLC. Really interesting conversation we had just the other day, and I've been really looking forward to this podcast. We're going to talk today about sustainability and how it applies to, many of the businesses out there and what John does in the industry. So, John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So I admittedly, when we spoke last, I told you I didn't know much about environmental sustainability or the science behind it. And you gave me like a crash course. So why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about your organization, your company, and what do you guys do?
Great. Well, our company supports industry and lots of other special interest, trades associations, other NGOs, all sorts of different organizations that are either complying with environmental regulations or they're trying to improve their sustainability practices, all with the goal of doing that kind of in a practical way. And we use our experience to create what sometimes are challenging solutions, especially when there's no existing roadmap for how that entity is going to proceed.
Tell me about how you got started, like the actual company. I think you told me last that it was a sort of a ragtag bunch of people that had a lot of experience, and that's what made you a bit different, right? Is that it's almost like everybody came to your organization with a lot of experience, and that's what makes you guys really, really, taken more seriously in the industry, right?
Well, that's part of it. So I'm a recovering oil company process engineer, and was an environmental manager, and I came out of 18 years worth of working with a large environmental consulting company. And from that experience, I had a large list of things I wanted to do differently. So 10 years ago now, I began attracting kind of like-minded colleagues who had worked with me in that company and even before, who wanted some of the same things. They wanted flexible work hours. They wanted freedom to decide how many hours a week to work. And they wanted the ability to participate in their work direction through the clients they help us pursue. And so that was the common ground that started attracting people that I already knew and a few people that I didn't know to the concept.
So tell me more about the work, right? I mean, you guys aren't industry specific. There are a lot of people that are out there that need an environmental sustainability study that want to show that they're, practicing what they preach, right? So who are you working with? What do your jobs typically look like?
Well, I don't know if there is a typical job because it seems like everyone is a little bit different, but our clients are probably more industry than anything else. And industry in the broader sense, it could be companies that manufacture, a very small niche consumer product up to large companies that basically make a family of large items, consumer products from, at scale, across the global environment in lots of plants. So what does that look like? Well, with all these different kinds of clients, the initial starting place is always to try to quantify where you are. So basically, what kinds of operations do you do, and what sorts of environmental impacts are there from those? And this is not the traditional look at that was environmental regulations, which tended to focus on air pollution, water pollution, solid waste generation. That's kind of the last wave that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now we're in the sustainability wave, where people are asking the questions, well, what about your carbon impact? What about other environmental impacts you may have that impact on, the community around you? But then also, what are your sustainability practices? What sort of policies do you have? What sort of governance do you have? And even touching into social things, what does your supply chain look like? Are there issues with the companies outside the U.S. that provide you with a product, maybe in third world countries? And are there labor issues associated with that? All that comes into the broad umbrella that's sustainability. So the starting place with all those things is to quantify where you are. And then once you know where you are, to try to say, do I want to change? And if so, what can be done practically to move me from where I am to where I might want to be?
And that's something that you're helping your clients walk through, is that you're doing these impact studies and saying, all right, these are your areas of potential improvement. Here's areas where you need to make a change kind of thing. Or how do you walk through a client when you have, or like at the end stage when you actually have that report? What's it, what kind of impact are you making with your clients?
Well, I think one of the things that differentiates us is that we take a really practical approach to that point in their evolution, which is, we have to understand the competitive business climate, and we have to understand the regulatory climate and how it's changing before we come up with any kind of a recommendation to them that says, here's what you might want to consider doing. Because, any action you take is a cost benefit. There might be some improvement. Maybe I gain market share because I'm able to talk about what I'm doing, but maybe my customers and my stakeholders don't care quite so much about that. So you want to make sure that you're in tune with how that's changing. And, if you follow politics here in the United States, you know that the landscape has changed dramatically, but we don't operate in a business community that is in a vacuum. It is a global economy. There's a lot of pressure from the outside to push sustainability to the forefront. There are a lot of investors that are focused in that way. If your company is connected through Europe, then you have a completely different mindset than you see here in the U.S. with respect to that. So we help the client tune in based on all of those sort of possible influencers to try to make the right choices about what you might do. And the solution is not always to drive yourself to the best possible place. It's to decide, what do I want to do? I've got to stay in business. I've got to stay profitable, and I've got to compete with the other companies who are playing this same game as well.
Yeah, it's like a catch-22. And so are you on that front helping them make decisions around, or does that you essentially provide them with that report and then they're able to make their own decisions? Like, when does that baton get?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it varies with clients as far as how much of the time we get to be in the room, so to speak. I think what's more likely to happen is that we're a frequent phone a friend as we travel down that highway. So, they like to feel they have control, and they don't always want outsiders to be involved in that process. But at some points they get stuck, and there'll be a decision point where they really just don't have all the angles they want at that particular junction. And so we come back into the game and say, okay, well, we can do some comparison studies for you. Like, you could do this or you could do that. And if you do this, here's what happens. And if you do that, here's what happens. And by the way, here's what regulations might be changing in other countries, which is also a thing. If you're a global provider of products and services, then you can't just be focused on the regulations that are happening here in the U.S. You also have to have an eye on, well, where am I selling? Am I selling in Asia? The rules are moving very fast in Asia, surprisingly fast, in fact. Am I selling in Europe? Some of the countries and the EU in itself have started to enact sustainability-related requirements on incoming goods to their countries.
So you're talking a lot about different government agencies, different governments in general. Is there a governing body that you get your certifications from, that, who provides you with that rubber stamp that says that, John's math is good, and that his studies are valid and should be taken seriously?
Well, that's a great question, and I wish there was a simple answer to that, but like many things, it depends. So in the U.S., there is not really any government agency that has jurisdiction over all things sustainability, not even close. You have EPA that's out there creating some regulations that are primarily around health effects. And as you know, the current administration has steered them back on things that are related to climate at this point in the game. But that doesn't mean that there are not alternate pathways. And so one of those pathways are professional associations. And with respect to the base plate of what is typically an analysis for a product, which is a life cycle assessment, there is a professional association called the American Center for Life Cycle Assessment, ACLCA, and I'm actually on the board of directors of that. It's an organization that provides professional standards and also provides a certification process. So they have something called a certified professional, which I hold that designation. and that certified professional is similar to what you might see in the engineering world, where there are professional engineers, which I also happen to be a professional engineer registered in the state of Texas as well.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that, because the math always is overwhelming for me. Like, I always think about, when I think about the amount of decisions that go into, a mathematical equation to determine sustainability or environment impact, it's got to be, weeks of work, right? I mean, they're not easy problems. They're fairly complex, no?
Well, they are, but at the base, and this is something I do a lot of training for companies and for also individual practitioners, and I've done some public workshops too. And the basic concept that I try to leave people with is that it all boils down to what I call A times B equals C. And so A is you have some sort of a flow rate. And then B is you have some sort of emission factor that says if this is occurring at a certain rate, then there will be some sort of an impact that's generated. And then C is the answer, which is literally just the product between those two things. So in all things sustainability, you're creating an activity and you're measuring that activity in some way. And then there's an emission factor associated with that. And you get an output in this case, which is carbon dioxide, methane, or N2O, nitrogen dioxide. Those are the primary greenhouse gases, which are your focus when you deal with sustainability, environmental impacts. But there are other impacts that LCA studies, that are things like acidification and eutrophication and toxicity for plants and animals as well, and humans. So all that is part of the larger sustainability universe.
When I think about this, from a cost perspective, I almost always think of the green option as being the more expensive option. I think even in like PSE&G from our electric provider, I get an option to go with the like CO2 reduced product, and it's 10 cents more expensive per unit or something, right? So there's actually a story that you told me on our first call about where you were able to save a company. It was in the Exxon Valdez area, a large amount because of the advice that you were able to provide. I would love for you to retell that. And then also if there's any other stories where you can kind of talk about the financial impact, where it was like, hey, because of the advice that we were able to provide, we were able to actually create a savings for a company and impact them in that way.
Well, man, that's two really good questions. So let me take the one about savings overall, and then I'll go to the Valdez example. But savings overall, it's fascinating because one of the primary reasons why the Trump administration has said we want to move away from climate is because they don't believe in the direct impact between actions you take and whether or not it's going to impact the climate. And let's set that aside for a minute and say, well, wait a minute. One of the things that you have to understand about carbon footprinting is that carbon tracks energy use directly, and energy costs money. So if I'm able to provide a solution to you that uses less energy, guess what? You're going to have a lower carbon footprint, but you're also going to spend less money because you're buying less energy. And somehow that's gotten lost in the public arena. And I don't understand how we got so far away from the primary driver for a business is the profit. And your profit is largely governed for a lot of businesses around their energy use. So saying we're not going to deal with carbon anymore, it is sort of anticlimactic. It's sort of, an oxymoron in terms of, well, do you care about your cash flow? Well, actually they do. So let's go to the story that you mentioned, because this is a very unique one. So we were contacted by a client, a potential client who is a regional advisory council that was appointed as a result of the Exxon Valdez oil spill up in Alaska. And they were set out there to be a watchdog and make sure that industry behaved themselves. And so they came to us and said, we want to hire you. And we said, well, we mostly work with industry, but we're open to the idea. And then they explained it. They said, well, the situation is this terminal is being told by a rule change that EPA has proposed that they will have to put floating roof tanks on their crude oil storage tanks. And they currently have closed vapor systems that collect the vapors and control them in a very, very conservative way. The terminal has said, well, you know what? If we are forced to do this, we think our emissions will actually be higher. And so why would we want to do that? It's going to cost us a whole lot of money, and the emissions are going to be higher. Are they right? And so they came to us. We did the math, gathered the data, looked at the process quite carefully, and were able to make an argument that, yeah, actually the terminal is right. If they put in these floating roof tanks, their emissions will be substantially higher. And there's a lot of other issues, like it snows more in Valdez than it does anywhere else in the U.S., and you've got to keep the snow off the floating roofs. That's kind of a problem. So it was an operational issue. It might even have been a safety issue, and it was going to move us in the wrong direction. So we got together and put together a demonstration that went to EPA that said, hey, you need to grant a waiver for this situation because it's going to make matters worse, and they're going to spend a bunch of money they don't need to spend. And EPA agreed. And so we saved Valdez Terminal the money, and we supported our client because we were able to show them that this was a positive step for the community, not a negative step. Now, you don't get to do this every day, but it's fascinating. And that's the kind of unique challenges that we get confronted with in our business.
No, I love that. And I think that it's a very unique position that you're in as sort of this independent provider that can then, look at things objectively, right? Without necessarily being financially motivated, right? Like, would I want the numbers to go this way? It doesn't matter to me because I'm not financially impacted by them. Like, I want to make sure that my client knows all of the scenarios, in which case, you can provide that sort of, like I said, objective position, right? And then I thought what you said was very interesting about, companies being able to reduce their overall energy consumption can actually increase profitability. So you're right in that sense that it is an oxymoron, right? Where they're like, oh, well, if this isn't on trend anymore, we'll just throw it out the window. But maybe it's even more important because the cost of materials and goods is going up. And so what can we control is potentially our energy consumption, right? So, maybe more and more people should be getting environmental, consultants to come in and look at their consumptions.
Absolutely. And it's not just energy use. It could be those very precious raw materials that go into your product. If you can produce the same product with less raw materials, you're buying those raw materials. So think about that for a minute. Isn't that going to be a lower cost? Well, it could be. Not always, but it could be. So is carbon a natural enemy of cash flow? Some would try to get you to believe that, but I would say actually the converse is true. Ignoring these kinds of things could actually increase your cash flow, make your operating expenses higher.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought for sure. It's like almost like who's creating the narrative. And if you find out that it's like, oh, it's big energy that's behind it, you're like, oh, it makes sense now. It all adds up, right? You're like, oh, they don't want us paying attention to energy consumption. They want us to like mythify the fact that, it's going to cost more if it's green or if it's efficient. But by definition, efficiency should be more cost effective. No?
I think that's right. Yes, absolutely.
So I want to pivot a little bit and kind of talk about your company, your organization, what makes you guys unique, right? We've talked a little bit about it, but you kind of created this space for professionals to do what they love. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your core values, your culture that you've kind of created over there?
Absolutely. So we like to think of ourselves somewhat as the uncompany, and I don't know if that's been trademarked anywhere, so we don't use that, on our website, but that's kind of our informal motto. We don't seek out entry-level employees. We hire people who already know how to be good consultants. We've kind of learned our lesson in our past lives with that. But we pay everybody hourly, so they get paid for every hour they work, and they even get overtime. And that's pretty uncommon in consulting, but it's one of those things that we brought to this exercise as kind of a lesson learned. We start our benefits at 20 hours a week, so we can appeal to people that are semi-retired, moms that want to stay with their kids sometimes, all kinds of people in all sorts of different work situations. Maybe they have another hobby they want to do. Maybe they want to work with an NGO and volunteer for part of their time. They can certainly do that. But on the technical side, we seek practitioners who understand the industry and how it works. That's a fundamental precept of what we do. They aren't afraid of large amounts of data because, in spite of the fact I tried to make it sound completely simple, it's not just A times B equals C. There's a lot of times when we do that math, let's put it that way. So large amounts of data, there are complicated regulations, they're evolving, and there are sometimes more complicated calculations and even the use of models to help us do some of the things that we do. Another key point is that we have people that work every day doing what they do, and we don't have managers that just manage. All of our managers, me included, do technical work every day on projects. So we're as flat as you could possibly be as an organization. We don't have offices. We all work remotely. So we have one of the lowest carbon footprints of any business you could imagine for that reason. And it means that the staff gets to live where they want to live and even travel the country as they work. We've had 2 employees that took a tour across the country, and their work followed them as they moved along. And one of our employees, I think, took 2 months to do that, just sort of traveling around, and she brought her dog with her. And meanwhile, she's doing her work, and she would show up for conference calls and be able to do all the things that we need to do. But you don't have to show your face in an office and, be in a cube in the same place, in the same location all the time to do what we do.
And no plans to go old school and get an office space. There's a big old push to get everybody back into offices.
Yeah, that's a great notion. However, what we found out is, you don't have to be in the client's location directly. You don't have to be in an office directly. And part of the key to that actually is having more mature, more experienced employees who don't need that day-to-day face-to-face coaching. So what goes with that business model is to not hire the entry-level people. And so that's what enables us to get away with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a friend that during COVID decided to move to Costa Rica, and he's been living and working remote in Costa Rica for the last 5 years. So it seems like, the remote, as long as you can maintain the work, and like you said, there's a level of seniority that goes along with that, then, then you can enjoy to live wherever you so choose.
And we have people in 14 states right now, so we're kind of living that to an extreme.
Yeah. What's that like, though? I mean, that's got to be fairly challenging to manage I don't know if it is or not, but to manage the sort of HR side of it, because you're operating in so many different states.
Yeah, that is a bit of a challenge. And one of the ways that we get our people connected more closely together is that we do have a face-to-face retreat once a year. In fact, we're about to have one next month on the East Coast. And we get people together for 3 days, and we do some training, we do some brainstorming, we do some planning, and just plain old visiting with your friends, because
Nice.
our employees are friends. That's a fundamental part of, again, what our fabric is. We're almost a family company, even though we're not really a family. We kind of behave that way a lot, I guess you could say. So that's one of our secrets to success. As far as connecting people any other ways, it just seems to be more or less organic with the people we have. And so part of it is selecting the people that are going to fit into your vibe and your culture, and doing a little bit of homework on the front end to try to make sure that the people that you hire are going to be a good fit for the way we do our business. And it doesn't always work. I'll be honest, we've had some people that have come in and didn't like what they saw, or, needed the structure of an office. And we actually have one little sort of hack for that, and is that several of our employees have actually used a co-work setup, so that they're able to go into the office a few days a week and be around some human beings as opposed to not. And because we are relatively sustainable, we don't travel to our client locations very often, so that's another touch point that employees can get with sort of the outside world. But it does happen from time to time. In fact, to myself and one other employee are going to Montana for a plant visit for an entire week in a couple of weeks. So it occasionally happens, but it's once in a blue moon. And, frankly, 3/4 of the clients we work with, we've never met face to face.
That's pretty cool. And it's interesting that you're like almost like a true hybrid, right? Like
Yes.
You're offering that, workspace, on site, being able to, travel to Montana. That's pretty cool. Really awesome. I always like to end these on like a fairly optimistic note. I'm an optimist myself. So maybe you could tell me something that you're really looking forward to towards the end of this year, or that's coming down the pike in 2026 that, you're very much looking forward to.
Well, that's a good question. I think one of the biggest things that we're looking forward to as a company is sort of sorting out the invasion, if you will, of AI and software and how that's going to drive us forward. And it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, because the companies that thrive are going to be the ones that figure out how to play the game the best. And so that's what we're looking forward to and we have some pretty good ideas around how to coexist with evolving software and how to coexist with AI. And not saying we don't use those things routinely, because we do. It's a key part of our business. But finding that sweet spot where the technical expertise of our team is valued and our clients perceive that they need that close sort of triangle between the AI, which is going to be a part of our business, the software, which is going to be part of our business, and the expertise of people who've been there, done that. So the better we're able to conquer that. And so, it's not a milestone dot on the map where I can say, in February, we're going to be doing this. I can't give you that kind of a roadmap, but it is on our minds literally every single day. And we're learning and we're growing and we're evolving and we're bouncing off the walls of the tunnel that leads towards that place. And I think that's what keeps us going every day. And I think what's also going to happen is that the demand for what we do is not going to decline, as some people have predicted. I think it is going to increase as the world marketplace has its way with us here in the U.S. And as that happens, the positive is just what I said earlier, is that if we can get people to realize that there are benefits to this climate thing that they haven't seen before, and realize that there are bigger stakeholders out there that need and want this information. And we just got certified by EcoVadis. That's one of the key ESG registration services where you can upload a bunch of information and these people score you and they tell you how good you are at sustainability. We are now a trainer of people that are putting information into that platform. So again, it's an effort to respond to how the marketplace is thirsty for that knowledge about how people are conducting their business. And I think that'll be more and more of a platform. We have a lot of unique ideas that I can't talk about because they're still a point in progress and we don't want them to walk away from us. But we're hopeful for the future, but we realize we've got to keep moving. If you're stagnant, you're absolutely going to get left behind.
Yeah, no, you've convinced me, John. Really, like I said, I didn't know much about the environmental sustainability side of things, but I always thought it is more like trendy. But it's definitely not. It's definitely vital to the profitability of these like medium to larger size companies, even the small businesses that want to make sure that they're operating as efficiently as possible. It's vital. I think it really is.
It is, and we've been engaged with some of the largest companies. Our longest standing client is actually a Fortune 200 company, and we do almost all of the sustainability work for them and have for 7 years now. So it's fish of all different sizes, which is the diversity, which really is one of the things that gets us going every day, is that it's a new challenge. It's different. It's not the same thing over and over again.
Thank you for being a guest today. Like I said, I was really looking forward to this one. I thought your stories are always very interesting. I think what you do is phenomenal and vital to the health of the planet and the health of commerce and industry in general. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope to have you back one day in the future. Really.
And maybe I can talk about that thing we haven't done yet that we will have done by then.
Absolutely, I love it. That's good.
All right.
We'll look forward to it.
Take care very much. Thank you.
All right, John. Thank you. Take care.